who's doing the toast? We didn't set. We're rebooting the whole thing.
Yeah, blessedly, my partner is okay with me decorating with sporting equipment.
How many surfboards do you have?
We have 3.
Awesome. What do they ride out here? Longboards or?
Yeah, that's not a longboard. It doesn't look like.
No, this
Like
is
a
a sort of
hybrid?
hybrid board that's been really fun. It's epoxy, so it floats better, even though it's shorter. It's really pretty fun.
It's been so long since we've done this, I forgot how we start.
Yeah, so when we were talking about rebooting it, Justin was like, hey, why don't we do it in a slightly different format where instead of like doing it as a true interview, like the drinking stays the same, but instead, hey.
Bottoms up.
Cheers to that.
There's a first opportunity for a toast.
The price of improvement is failure. Welcome to Liquid Philosophy.
Hey everybody, we're back. It's Liquid Philosophy. We went on hiatus for a little bit because Jeremy Rinker and I were finishing books, and we finished our books. So cheers to that. Yay! Right. Then I'm gonna take a drink because I need one for that. So some things have been afoot in both the world and in academia as of late, and our worlds have significantly changed. And so we thought it'd be a great opportunity to reboot Liquid Philosophy and bring back an opportunity to hear about academic life and the important work that we do from some faculty at UNCG. And so we decided to, in honor of the fact that we live most of our lives on Zoom these days, we decided to do it as a video podcast. And we're changing up the format a little bit. Rather than just interviewing one person, we've decided to invite on a couple of faculty members to join us. So we have Michael Hemphill joining us and Jen Feather joining us. We'll give them a chance to introduce themselves in just a second. But we really want to have a more guided conversation about, or maybe unstructured conversation. It's exactly the opposite. We want to have a more unstructured conversation about some of the things that we're currently dealing with in academia. Again, the important work we do. And then give listeners a chance to really get to know us, Jeremy, myself, and Justin as hosts, but also get some of the insights that we have on the various different challenges that we face as academics, as professors, as people who are civically engaged in many of the conversations that are going on right now. So welcome back. We are rebooting Liquid Philosophy. I guess this is technically season 3, episode 1. So, and yes, we would like to welcome our 2 guests. We have Michael Hemphill and Jen Feather joining us. So Jen, do you want to give a quick intro of who you are?
Sure. I'm Jen Feather. I'm an associate professor in the Department of English and cross-opponent in women's gender and sexuality studies, and I study 16th century literature.
Okay, great. We invited Jen because she's one of our biggest fans. And
our only fan.
We're very happy to have Jen with us. So we also have Michael Hemphill. And Michael, you want to give a quick intro?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Michael Hemphill, assistant professor, Department of Kinesiology. I teach in our EDD program, and my research interests are related to positive youth development in sports and restorative practices.
And Justin and Jeremy, you just want to remind everybody in case they forgot.
He's Jeremy Rinker.
I'm Jeremy Rinker still, and I'm an assistant professor in peace and conflict studies. And my research interests are not just neoliberalism, but also the marginalization and issues of Dalit studies in India, as well as trauma and trauma awareness, and many other things.
Justin Harmon, assistant professor in the Department of Community and Therapeutic Recreation, and I study music and life course development and recreation interventions post-diagnosis of cancer. And the book that Jeremy wrote was inspired by Dr. Seuss. It is called The Squirrel and the Beard.
And Justin is actually growing his beard in emulation of what mine used to be, which
I'm
was
trying. It's hard.
We need to have like Easter eggs in every single episode now about Squirrel Beard and Uncle Justin. So I'm Marianne LaGreco, and I am in the Department of Communication Studies. I'm an associate professor, and most of my work focuses on food and community, and I've been doing a lot of that lately because I mean, everybody knows that life has definitely been transformed a little bit because of COVID-19 and coronavirus. And I was just talking about this the other day. I last met with my students on March 12th. That was the last, March 11th was the last day I met with them. And so it's been 4 weeks to the day that I last met with my students. And we have moved everything online since then. And it's not only affecting our teaching, but I think it's also affecting the way that we do research and service. And so we really wanted to, I think, take an opportunity to, Justin has affectionately dubbed this episode WTF, because that's kind of what it feels like right now. Because I know all of us are in very different spots. Some of us already teach online. Jen's on research leave right now. And so that means a whole different set of things to deal with and think about. So what do y'all think? What the fuck? What's your life been like in the last month?
I think we're all still in that WTF mode, right? Like, I mean, at least I am. Like, my circadian rhythms are a little bit off. I'm like, my kids don't have to get up to go to school because they have Zoom classes, you know, and they don't leave the house. So it's allowed me to sleep in more and then get up later and go to bed later. And yeah, so it's just completely whacked my schedule in some ways. How about others?
Michael?
It was, I mean, I teach online, so the transition was easy. I mean, it was really no transition for me in regards to teaching. The research has been interesting because I've been working with Jeremy in public schools, and so that shut down completely. And so we're trying to think about how to support the students that are helping us with the projects, and what that means to have community partners who are now in crisis mode, right? So part of me is, that faculty instinct, like, oh, well, maybe we can write a paper now, or we can continue to focus on the project in other ways. But it's like, well, our community partner is trying to figure out how to get food to students, or figure out how students can log in just to have access to their education, so it's just causing some reflection on that I think we're going to have to continue long after things return back to normal. So-called normal.
I felt some similar challenges, I think, because I teach a service learning class. I teach a class called Community and Communication, and the students have a 20-hour service project that they are supposed to do as part of that work. And a handful of them already had their service projects done. About 2/3 of them hadn't exactly started yet, because most of the events that they were working with were starting in March and April. And most of the events were being hosted either in the last 2 weeks of April or right away at the beginning of May. And so when UNCG made the decision to go online and we saw more and more social distancing happening, it not only changed the way that our students could access partners, but it also, our partners changed. Like, they were trying to figure out how to take their work online. They had to cancel most of the events that the students were going to be working on because they required some sort of face-to-face interaction, and that wasn't going to be possible now. And we simply didn't have the time to move that sort of thing online that quickly. And so when it came to the service project, I felt like I was really challenged in terms of what to do, because I wanted to honor the work that some of the students had already done. And at the same time, I also didn't want to require students to have to do a service project when UNCG and the governor of the state are telling people to stay home. And I think in any other sort of scenario, you might say something like, well, figure out what you can do online. Well, our partners were not in a position where they could partner with us anymore because things changed so much. And I think that was a pretty eye-opening experience in terms of how to make that work. So I ended up making multiple things in the class optional. So I gave students a lot of agency on how to finish the class. I was like, I don't know what your circumstances are like. I'm pretty sure things are going to change like 50 times. Like, we all know this, but, and most of our listeners might know this too, but like, students now have the option to take pass-fail on classes. But that, we didn't know that for a while.
Satisfactory, unsatisfactory.
Or satisfactory, unsatisfactory. Sorry. Yes. Satisfactory, unsatisfactory. So, which is basically pass-fail. But we didn't know that for a while. And so I think we were kind of of kind of wandering around in the wilderness trying to figure out what to tell students, and at the same time trying to still honor the work that they've done, but not ask more than we should be asking of them as we moved on.
Jen?
Yeah, I mean, so on the research side of things, I had some research trips planned, and so that's been really disappointing. And just strange things like I can't get articles out of the library. Like there's this building over there that's just, now safe and secure. But I'm sort of interested in you guys' experience of food networks and that sort of thing, because in the other half of my life, my partner is an Episcopal priest, and she has a health and wellness and feeding ministry where we have a community meal and food pantry every Tuesday night. And so trying to figure out how to do that in the age of COVID-19, when people, sort of just today, she had to ask someone on the phone, like, can you wait until Saturday for groceries? Because I don't know that we can get them to you any quicker than that. And so there's a whole host of issues that come with that, and yet people need to eat.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you guys' experience of that
I
has
feel
been.
like I could take over half the podcast with this answer. So I'm gonna let everybody else talk first, and then I'll come in.
Go with it.
Go with it. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, most of my work focuses on food and community networking around food. And some of it goes back to, I was reminded recently of a conversation that I had with someone who had just moved here from Charlotte. And this conversation was back in 2010. We were at an event at Elsewhere Artist Collaborative. And she was telling me how surprised she was that Greensboro had virtually no local food system infrastructure.
Pouring my beer.
Jeremy's showing up. Maybe we should show off all of our beverages.
Yeah, I was going to ask that question earlier. Like, what are people
beverages.
drinking during COVID-19?
All right, so what is it? We'll pause before
beer.
we get into food. What's everybody drinking?
Pisgah Graybeard. It's an American IPA.
Sweetwater 420 Extra Pale Ale.
And I'm drinking a Deep River Backcountry Black IPA.
And I am drinking a Rowan's Creek bourbon,
Nice.
which is one of my favorites, and I broke it out especially for Liquid Philosophy.
Nice.
Oh, you.
I am drinking a coveted Prior beer because
Wow, they're done.
they're done. Most Prior closed on our hiatus, and I still have a couple growlers left, and I'm gonna drink the rest of them tonight. Not the rest of them. I still have.
Yes,
But I'm drinking this one tonight. So cheers then. Thanks for joining us on the reboot for Liquid Philosophy. Cheers.
Yes, cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, food. So this conversation I had back in 2010, somebody had said, Greensboro doesn't have much of a local food infrastructure. And so I think over the last 10 years, we've done a lot to build that up and to network people together. And I think one of the best examples that we have done as a community is getting the school meal network up right away for the K through 12 kids. Mm. And here's some backstory on this, because not a lot of people know this. I actually explained it to some of the Guilford County Schools folks. This actually came out of a conversation that we organized in 2012 with the IRC, the Interactive Resource Center, a group called Share the Harvest, the Guilford County Cooperative Extension, and some folks at UNCG. We had a couple of community meetings. We had over 100, 120 people at each meeting. And at the second meeting, we had some breakout sessions where we focused on what do people want to organize as a community in order to address gaps that we might have in our food system. And so out of that, we got some momentum on the Mobile Oasis Farmers Market, which is a project I've been a part of. But one of the other groups talked about filling that gap month that K through 12 schools have when they are on summer break. The school meal program goes from June through July, but then August is a gap month. And so some folks organized together to try to get a network of rec centers, churches, other community spaces that could host meals during August for kids to come pick up a sandwich and an apple and stuff like that. And so that network got launched in 2015 alongside the Greensboro Community Food Task Force, and some work with, I think Rotary was one of the big organizers around that. And so when they launched that, kids got used to knowing where to go for food over the summer. And so when K through 12 schools closed, Gulf County Schools and several other partners like Weaver Foundation and some folks were able to get that network up right away. Like schools were closed on Monday and the network was open by Wednesday. So that kids immediately had a place to get fed. And so I think we did a really good job getting the network up for kids. I think it's been a challenge more for families that don't have kids. I think it's been a giant challenge. We have a huge gap right now when it comes to networking around food for seniors. There are a lot of senior citizens who are scared to leave their homes right now and don't know where to get food or don't know where it's safe for them to go. And so I know Greensboro Housing Authority and the city of Greensboro are working on that right now. But it's just been really impressive to see like so many people immediately get mobilized. I worked with a few folks and we got a list that we put together. It's a Google Doc that's kind of this living document where we're adding places where folks can go to get free meals or what grocery store hours are. One of the biggest things is trying to figure out what restaurants are still open and where can people get takeout. This is the last comment I'll make, and then I'll like yield the floor to somebody else and take a drink.
Robert's Rules of Order.
I ran into Nick Benshoff, who owns Bandito Bodega, and he was talking about how they are almost busier now than when before the stay-at-home ordinances went into effect. And one of the things that he realized in all of this was just how dependent people are on carry-out food and not cooking at home. And I think that's I could go on for hours on that, so I'll stop and drink my beer.
No, I'll pick up there because I go to Bandito Bodega at least once a week, if not twice. So, you know, they know like pretty much what time of day I'm going to pull up on what day of the week. And like my food is basically ready without calling in. Though I'm thinking about not going anymore because, you know, part of the thing with this whole pandemic is that every little negative possibility gets inside my head, right? And so now we're at this point in time where everybody's wearing masks and gloves everywhere. And then I'm like, wait, you know, like I'm all about supporting these restaurants and I'm too lazy to cook anyways. So I like going there and they make better food than I make anyways, but they might be wearing gloves, but they're definitely not wearing masks. You know, some restaurants are, and some like, is it really, you know, like safe? Like, so I'm sure it probably is, but like sort of like the surreal elements and like the distrust that have like creeped in because of like the paranoia and the misinformation and the lack of certainty surrounding everything coronavirus has got me like, you know, now I'm just going to sit at home and eat beans and rice or something. So like, I was at Whole Foods the other day, literally wearing an orange bandana because I don't have any masks. And I was like, so I was wearing sunglasses and an orange bandana, waiting in line, one in, one out at Whole Foods. And I was like, man, this is just like dystopian, you know? And we're not even anywhere near done yet, right?
No.
Right.
And that's just one, you know, fucked up thread of all the threads that have come together in this.
Yeah. Michael, what have you guys been working on? You were talking about some of your partners focusing on feeding kids.
You know, Communities in Schools is a partnership Jeremy and I've cultivated over the last couple of years, and they're in touch with families who we know the students in those families have risk factors for dropping out of school, and some of those deal with experiencing homelessness, food insecurity, various types of issues. And so the value that I've seen in them is they know how to find these students and they know where these families are. They have the relationships to close the food gap because the district seems to be doing great. I think there's about 1,000 students who they have had no contact with since things happened. That's out of 75,000 in the district. So Communities in Schools is one of those organizations who I think can find some of the, not all of those 1,000, but some of them. And so I felt a little, me myself, I felt a little bit helpless in terms of like, what can I do? So I decided just to make a monthly contribution to them for the duration of this crisis, because I know that they're going to use it, and it's going to reach people. And I also think of, so their executive director, Jimmy Williams, has been in charge for 25 years or more there. But, he's in his mid 60s, I believe. And so he's in that kind of population of at risk, so to speak, as are some of their staff. But they're frontline people. I mean, they're out delivering food, exposing themselves to the different risk. Whereas I date an epidemiologist. So on March 13th, I went to Costco and I stocked my place up, and I haven't been in a public business since then. So it just reminds me of just the privilege I have to be able to do that. And there's these folks that we work with, risk every day, right? So, I'm trying to figure out what can I do to help, and I figured I can give a little bit of money, and that's one way. But I still feel like I'm not quite doing everything I can.
All right, I have 2 follow-up questions on this.
Yeah.
What was everybody's day? Like, what was the moment when you were like, all right, I got to go stock up? I know exactly when mine was. It was when Harvard called it. It was when Harvard sent their students home. I think that was on March 10th or 11th. And I was like, that's it. It's coming. Everybody get ready. And I immediately dropped everything that I did. And went out and didn't overshop, like literally just bought for what my roommate and I needed. But that was the day. What was your moments, or what were your moments?
I don't know that I have one in particular. I mean, I think it's been like this wave of things where it's like, oh crap, I better go. And I have actually been out some, but I've been wearing a mask, and and it's funny. I just got a text from my brother earlier today. He had to restock. He lives in the DC area. And he sends me this picture of him with like gloves and mask, and he's got like, winter gloves on, and it's, nice out and stuff. And it's just interesting how like psychologically we've gotten more and more like embedded in trying to be protected. I don't know. For me, it's like at first, I mean, you walk around, and I live very close to Hamilton Lakes, and I go out to Hamilton Lakes and the place is crazy. People are all over Hamilton Lakes walk. I mean, I've been going running. So, I'm like dodging people on the trail. And so that started to kind of get me like, okay, maybe I need to be more careful and not even go there. And so my wife even decided like, I'm going to Guilford Woods, and ironically, some of you may know Dia Abdo, who is our new CNNC director. Dia teaches at Guilford and lives around the corner from me. And I've seen her at Hamilton Lakes multiple times. And then we decide to go over to Guilford Woods, because it's also close by just to walk. And it's like, oh, hey, it's Dia again. It's like, there's only limited outdoor spaces you can get away to, and like, and everybody's doing it. So it's like, you can't, even if you're not in a public space, and like, I know, Michael, you're out walking, even if you're in those places, it's like, you still run into people. And I don't know. So I can't think of one day particularly for me, but it's more been like a kind of an onset of more and more like, oh shit, this is getting more and more serious. Oh shit. Maybe I shouldn't go pick up the prescription at the drugstore. Maybe I shouldn't. Oh, I've got a deposit. Like the other day I went to the bank, and then I was like, okay, well, I can do that in the car. I can just deposit the check. But it's like you're thinking through every time you're leaving the house, like what is, and I've driven maybe 3 times in the last like, month, and it's like, usually I would drive a lot more than that. So environmentally, that's great, and so that's the other thing that's interesting. There's just positive things that have come out of this too, right? I mean, the environmental degradation that's been going on, there's been a plateau or a dip even in that. And so like, that's a positive side. But the other question I had, and I don't want to like, shift the conversation, but as Michael was talking and knowing that population and community and schools, I think the other thing that's interesting that we've kind of heard from our partners is the digital divide. So there's this kind of assumption that like, oh, well, we'll just throw all the classes online. And it's like, these at-risk kids don't have access. And if they do, it's only on a cell phone, Yep. And it's like, they can't possibly learn that way, So that's the other thing that's kind of struck me is, and that I fear long term is that we've like turned this corner, like, oh, well, we can just do everything online. And it's like,
we're definitely coming back to that piece because I think that's gonna.
Yes, we are.
That's gonna be. And there's Jeremy's foreshadowing of neoliberalism in the academy.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, and I saw it again today in Faculty Senate, damn it.
Ooh, my
No,
giant
picking up-
ear is foaming.
What's that? Your
My giant ear is foaming.
Picking up about like the being outdoors kind of stuff, you know, I'm obviously in my neighborhood, I'm seeing a ton of people that I've never seen before, right? Because they're at home, they don't have anything else to do.
Yep.
Probably they can't go to the gym, and so their exercise is walking around the neighborhood. But I hike a lot, and I have a hiking program twice a week, every Wednesday and Saturday for survivors of cancer. And so the weekends have been getting so packed on the trails that I've had to suspend the hiking program because I cannot guarantee that I can keep us, even with proper distancing, keep us away from other people on Saturdays. The weekdays are still manageable depending on where you go. But, you know, it's great seeing all these people out using the trails as long as they're respectful of them and others while they're on there. But, you know, when people don't have anywhere to go, and then they're flocking there, just like there was something in the News and Record like last week about all the people hanging out in the parks and why they're closing the playgrounds and the basketball courts and all that stuff because people frankly aren't using common sense in terms, and they're interacting with a lot of people. That all makes sense, but then you start to, under the cloak of darkness, you see all the freedoms that are stripped from you. And it's a little eerie at times. You know, it's like how quickly we are to give up something with, you know, good rationale, but what are the unintended consequences, the collateral damage that comes from it? Like, what are the long-lasting Patriot Act style things that are going to come from this, which are troublesome, and nobody's really concerned about it right now because they're concerned about their lives, which is understandable.
Emergency, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I having listening to you, I'm thinking about, I edit a journal and my publisher is based in Calcutta, and he's a wealthy Indian. He's not by no means, you know, struggling. And I was talking to him on Skype the other day, and he's telling me, like, they have a lockdown in India. Police are beating people when they go outside. So, like, you know, I mean, it's a different context. And I said, well, how are you getting exercise? And he said, you know, I said, do you go up and down the stairs of your apartment building? And he's like, no, the management won't let us do that. And he said, actually, we have a running track in our building, which, you know, shows that that's a wealthy building. I said, oh, great. Well, so you can use the running track. And he said, no, they won't let us use that either. And I was like, what the hell? So like for 3 weeks, he's been holed up in a small, like 2-bedroom apartment with him and his wife. And it's like, I said, man, how do you get any physical exercise? And he said, I'm not worried about that. It's mental. Like, he's like, I'm going to go crazy if I'm here much longer, you know? And I'm like, man, it made me realize, like, wow, how privileged I am to be able to go out and walk around a very, you know, green neighborhood, and I can maintain distance pretty well. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting, and that could be one of the positive things is that it gets people out, and now maybe they realize being outside's a good thing. But then again, I don't know. My sense is that when this kind of, I was reading an article. I mean, I'm jumping around a little bit, but I was reading an article by Andrati Roy the other day. She had an article. You can look it up. It's on the Financial Times. And it just came out like maybe a week ago or 5 days ago. And she's talking about this COVID-19 thing is like a portal. She uses the kind of metaphor of a portal, and that there are different ways this thing could go. And there's so much opportunity in it, you know,
choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
Or you
And,
don't,
you know, and
you
so
really
like
get to choose it.
to go to your point, I mean, yeah, the Patriot Act stuff and the kind of curbing of freedoms is the real negative way this could go, and people aren't really thinking about that or talking about it. But then there's the positive sides too, and so you know, we really need to think about, like, where is this going to take us, and have some real reflection about that. I'll just show you guys. I'm wearing my I'm Peach shirt too. I just have to say.
So Jen, I want to hear a little bit about what were you planning on doing this semester? And is it still going to be salvageable? And in what other ways have you switched gears?
Well, so I had a lot of public talks coming up, which was kind of exciting because, you know, you research, you're writing, and then, wow, you get to talk about it to people who have responses. So I'm disappointed about that. And then I was supposed to go to Romania.
Oh, wow.
Because Ovid, who is a first century Roman poet, was exiled in what is now Romania. And 16th century playwrights were really into Ovid. Mm-hmm. And so I've been interested in thinking about the role of the public theater in abuses of authority. And so Ovid is a really good person to talk about that because he has a lot to say about abusive authority.
Yeah.
Seems relevant.
Yeah. So, you know, my partners in Romania were really great in archaeological sites and public talks. And, I mean, it's sort of really fascinating because no one's really thinking in 16th century studies about Ovid and exile and what is now essentially Central Europe or Eastern Europe. But it's this fascinating kind of nexus between the Ottoman Empire and the Christian West, and has this sort of liminal space. And of course, in the first century, it's the edge of empire. So there's a lot about empire, nation, how people are forming their identities in these kind of liminal spaces. And Romanians, because they're very proud of Ovid as a kind of hero, have thought a lot about this, and they've also thought a lot about abuses of human rights because of the communist history, and they're kind of in that reckoning. So those are the people who are having that conversation that's not really going on in other scholarships. So yeah, that's what I'm missing out on. I'm working on a plan to get back in 2021, but
so it was a conference they were putting on, or was it
no, I had there were two universities there that I was going to have. They call them faculty mobilities, but essentially kind of doing research and writing and some speaking. And there was one conference that I was going to be on literature and war, which has to do with my first book. So yeah, I mean, it was cool, right? We'd done a good job of setting it all up. But, you know, again, it's by far not the worst thing that has come to pass because of this particular scenario.
Well, abuses of power and exile seem very, you know, timely right now.
Yeah, and how we kind of collectively deal with those things.
Collective exile, yeah.
Yeah.
Alienation from your experiences and from your, you know, your life.
Yeah.
So. Art or life imitates art, I guess, right?
Yeah. Or, you know, I mean, part of what I'm thinking about is what is the role of art? Like, how does it help us process these kinds of, the emotional fallout of abusive authority, basically.
Jenna,
I'm sorry, Michael, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, are those trips lost, or do you think you might be able to pick that back up?
Yeah, it's going to depend on funding and timing and what things look like basically a year from now. I may end up in Italy next summer of 2021, which would be really interesting. If I were to do that, I would teach a course on kind of Italy as a global center, because a lot of Shakespeare's plays, Merchant of Venice, right, Othello, are all set in kind of an Italian mercantile world of the 16th century, and like, what is that multicultural world all about? So.
What will happen to the dog? Where's the dog going to go if you go to Italy?
Where is the dog gonna go? Well, so we have when we first found her, we found her in the parking deck outside of MHRA, and we were living in an apartment that did not allow dogs. And so I called my friend Risa Alpogarth, who's also in the English department. I said, Risa, I found a dog. And can you hang on to her while I actually had to go to a conference the next day? Can you hang on to the dog while I go to the conference and find a new apartment so I can keep the dog? So that is her foster family. And usually they take her for a little bit, and then Audra can probably go with me for some of it, but not for all of it. So yeah, so foster family time, which Michael, she loves.
Yeah. Michael, when did you get a cat? I didn't know you had a cat.
That was pretty great.
I don't really. It's Joanne's cat, and Joanne, before the COVID thing happened, she got deployed to Ghana for
wow.
She works for the CDC, and they were doing this polio, and they have a polio outbreak. So the cat got deployed here, and then they got rushed back a couple of weeks ago from Ghana to do COVID work. So the cat remains for the foreseeable future. So it's been fun having them around though.
Well, we're all animal people, but how nice is it to have an animal at this time when you're like locked in your house? Yeah. Like it's always great for me to have an animal, but especially now, especially because I live by myself.
Yeah.
I send my students video updates of the pugs. Just to try to keep them entertained, and yeah.
Do they return the favor with video?
No, not really. I think so many of our students are so like overwhelmed and dejected and like just don't really know what to do right now. Some of them are, I think, maintaining pretty well. I have not encountered a student yet who's like thriving in this new environment. But I've probably got about a third of my students who aren't really checking in all that much. And I'm pretty sure I was lucky in that I got to a point where everybody in my class could have a satisfactory. So everybody could at least, I was like, if you want to cut it off and take a C right now, that's fine. And I gave them all that option because we'd completed enough work for the course. And so I think some of them just checked out. And so as much as I would love to see really adorable animal videos back from my students, I do not have any. So that could be a plea to my students if any of them end up listening to this. Send me your funny dog.
They won't.
They
that sounds like a good transition into talking about the transition onto online.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although before you're already teaching online also though, right?
Me?
No, Jeremy is.
Yeah, I was, and I think Michael was too. And I was going to say, Michael, I thought your cat was maybe just a stray near the Minerva statue with the screen. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, Michael, go put an apple up on that thing.
Yeah, I can't.
Right.
Or I would.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny I'm to what you just said, Marianne. The way that students have reacted. I mean, a lot of mine are really stressed out because we have I'm teaching a capstone course for our program right now, and we have kind of a end of semester project that they do, and and it was online already. So we actually had four classes that I had set up in Stone 186 where we would have online. It would be like a synchronous class, but it's an asynchronous class mostly, and so I had to move those online. But those students have been stressing out because they have kind of one big grade at the end, so they don't really know. I mean, their grades right now look really bad, but I keep telling them no, there's a lot of points still out there because we have the big project at the end. And so they've just been stressing out, and I've had to literally be on Zoom calls with them and Google Chats, just kind of taking them off the cliff, because they're like, oh, I saw this satisfactory, unsatisfactory thing. Should I do it? And it's like, well, it doesn't really matter right now because you're going to get graded either way, right? It's an opt-in after grades come out. So right now I need you to just do everything you were going to do and try to power through as best you can, you know? And that's like kind of the message I'm trying to get across, but they're, you know, it obviously stressed in the environment that we're in. And so it's like, you know, I kind of sent out messages to my class. I had another class that's also online. I just happened to be fully online this semester. And I sent out to both my classes kind of, you know, we're proceeding as planned. I'm going to be lax on deadlines and stuff. I understand people are moving around. They had to leave the dormitory, stuff like that, you know, so, but at the same time, it's like, y'all knew what the game was from day one. It was on the syllabus. So nothing's really changed that much, right? And so that's been interesting because I think most of them have been all right with that, but there have definitely been, I've had to talk a number of them, particularly the ones whose grade is the lowest, really off that cliff. Like, no, just keep doing what you're doing. And maybe do it a little better, you know? And yeah, so how about you, Michael? What you've been online too. How have they reacted?
So I teach the program I teach in, they're all working professionals. So they all have full-time jobs. Most of them have kids and families. So there's a lot of complications there, and they're spread across the United States. So we have a student who's in New York City, right? So he's impacted differently than the student in West Virginia. So we tried to, so I'm being very flexible with deadlines, and there's a peer review assignment at the end of the semester that we canceled to basically give them a week at the end of the semester of flexibility. And they've appreciated that. I actually have a student who works in a hospital system, and so she's actually not turned in any assignments, which I understand. And they've kind of moved people who are doing kind of physical therapy work into assisting with the more nursing or kind of bringing people into the hospital type jobs. So, you know, she's stressed about the PPE equipment and things like that. So as a whole, you know, the students, I've got 20 students in a class and 18 of them are right on track and no problems. But they're all talking about their families and kids at home and all that stuff. And then the one observation I had from talking to a few undergrads is just the volume of stuff coming at them, because most full-time undergrads are taking 5 or 6 courses. And I'm like, you think about having 5 or 6 syllabi and 5 or 6 professors who are saying, like Jeremy and I, oh, we're going to be flexible, but my policy of flexibility is different than Jeremy's, is different than Justin's, is different than, you know, so by the time they get through just the figuring out what's happening, it's overwhelming. And that's before you even get to the rigor of the content that they got to deal with. So I definitely empathize with our students and what they're faced with in this situation, because my grad students, they take 2 classes a semester. So even though those might be challenging, I mean, it's easier to just keep up with like what's happening, right? I got 2 things I got to know versus like I got 5 or 6 things I got to know what's happening with.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I definitely think a lot about the point you made earlier, Jeremy, about like just this assumption of let's just move it all online. You know, because I, as a communication person, I sit here and I'm like, wait, because
he was joking,
right? One of the areas that I've always said is kind of understudied in our field are the long-term implications of online communication, and just how much can people really process through email. And how much time do we spend constructing email messages? And I think so much of that time gets taken for granted. And when I heard the announcement of, hey, we're just going to move everything online, I was like, oh my God, because honestly, my biggest weakness is email responsiveness. And so right now, like, I feel like I'm in hell in that sense, because I am constantly trying to keep up on emails and I'm just not great at it. And everything is that way now. And I've been trying to text and do phone calls as much as possible, because that's even just a little bit different. But it's like, there's so much information overload because you're able to cram so much more into written communication and in online written communication that we don't think about just the challenges and difficulties of processing it. Like I can't even imagine trying to take, if you're in 5 different classes in 5 different disciplines right now, like I couldn't even imagine trying to process all of that as a student right now.
Yeah. Well, and on top of that, just, I mean, the administration went to a website eventually, but that's so, I mean, like the first week or so of this, it was constant COVID.
Several weeks, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this constant barrage of like another update. And it just to the point where it's like, okay, I can't even deal with that. I mean, and I can imagine as a student, you're just like, I don't think half the students, more than half, I don't think most undergraduate students, let me say it this way, read more than like maybe 10% of those announcements that went out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so from a communications perspective, it is kind of interesting. Like, how do you get the message across of what's happening in real time? What I would say they should have done early, my critique is that they should have just put up a website and said, and posted basically everywhere all over the UNCG website, go there.
Push it there. Yeah.
We're going to be regularly updating there, and we will not barrage you with worthless emails that nobody's going to read, But we weren't really ready. I mean, I think the folks who in charge weren't really ready to do that in some sense, and so it was like they just got hemmed into like, oh, we gotta respond,
Yeah, I teach a grad class, a seminar class, 12 students in it. And I was like, well, like I hate online anything and I hate teleconferencing like we're doing right now. Anyway,
you're a Luddite.
But I was like, it shouldn't be that hard to go online. And, we meet for, it's a 2.5 hour class once a week. And I shortened it to 2 hours because it was clear people were having fatigue from 2.5 hours, myself included. But half the class, everybody's distracted, first of all, because when you're at home, your texts or your kids or whatever, or this is the TV's on in the background or whatever, so everybody's distracted. Yeah. But when you're not present with everybody in the actual room, you can't be held accountable the same way to like engage. And so, I had a 2-hour class while there was 12 people there with me and 3.5 other people for that entire time having a conversation. And I'm just like, come on, you're supposed to be graduate students. You're supposed to be reading material. You're supposed to be engaged. This is you chose to come to graduate school. This isn't one of those things where you have to do to, be in life where you get an undergraduate degree that everybody tells you that, you choose to go to graduate school at this point anyway. So that's challenging. With my undergrad class, I wanted it to be like similar to what I was teaching online or, in person. So like the way the class was structured but like, obviously that doesn't translate well. So I'm just trying to hold them accountable, but like, also realize the, ambiguity and like the unprecedented nature that we're dealing with. But even then, like so many people, especially with this SU stuff, like that shouldn't have been announced until the end of the semester.
Yes.
Because I've had so many people, even very good students who are receiving an A, just like, nah, pretty sure I could put it on coast for the rest of the time. And maybe some of them do actually have work and family things that are more important, and I accept that. But I also realize that some of those people are just taking advantage of the situation, and that's not a criticism on them or their generation. I think that's endemic to all people because of sort of how we've evolved as a society, or at least in this country, is that we're apathetic. We take shortcuts. I'm talking about myself as well. And
we know.
Yeah. But like when we can get away with something, we do. I mean, how often are we always looking out for ourselves, right? Like how much is that like individualism of the, pursuit of the quote unquote American dream really been, embedded in all of us because of our supposed social ideals. And that trickles down to those people that are emerging. So we shouldn't be shocked when this happens. And frankly, now that I say it, I probably shouldn't be pissed off about it either, because, of course they're going to act this way because this is how we act and this is how we, model. And it's tough. I guess it's tough to, have to, to face that and to deal with it. And if we, I know that we're talking about going online for the fall, which is, I don't even know, like it's head spinning, but like I said to a friend of mine, I was like, if we ever go to a point where they're like, it's just easier, it's just cheaper, it's just more efficient to be online.
We're headed there.
I'm out of education. Like this is not what I came here to do.
Yeah.
And I'll go find something else to do.
Yeah. Well, that was sobering. I think we need to drink for that.
We do need to drink. My face keeps
Neoliberalism now, Jeremy.
I keep watching my face get redder and redder and redder as this entire conversation goes on, and I don't think it's because I'm angry. I think it's because of the beer. So
where does that leave us?
Where does that leave us? I don't know. Where do y'all think it leaves us?
Sorry, I just felt the need to give another lecture.
As if you hadn't done enough online lectures, you felt like you had to do another one.
Hey, if you recorded it, let me run it in my class next week.
It'll be out there. All right. So what do you think I don't know, like how do we navigate this then in terms of, I mean, I've seen calls for people encouraging their colleagues to do a shitty job taking their classes online to avoid that exact scenario of, hey, this is cheaper, it's easier, it's all of those things. But like, I think about how much I gave up. Like, I'm still going to teach a good class because I can't not do that. Or at least finish it as best as I can, because that's just me personally. But I think about everything my students lost by not being able to have some of the face-to-face experiences in the classes that I'm teaching this semester. Now, I also I'm teaching the whole summer online, and everybody is, but I was already teaching online. Like I always teach my summer classes are always online. And so that has not been as big of a jumble and disconnect there. But that's what I think about more this semester is I'm still going to teach a good class, but my students lost a lot.
Mm-hmm. And that might balance it. I mean, there might be cost savings in online, but we're also sending $11 million out to our students this month for dorm refunds and cafeteria refunds. So our revenue's taking a big hit. I mean, there's no savings out of this. And there would be, I don't know how that math looks, but if we said a university is going to deliver online education to 20,000 undergraduate students or however many we have, I don't know that you would save money in that model because of the professional development that would be, I mean, there'd just be a lot. And then there'd be no bookstore revenue, dining, all those factors. I think I could even see a mandate where they say, you are absolutely mandated to have a Canvas page set up and ready to go in case something happened, and you could flip a switch and go online. I could certainly see that. And, I could see us becoming innovative in how we use online to engage undergraduate students, freeing up class time. So maybe there's less of this straight up lecturing to students that a lot of people say is not effective. So there can be a lot of good value coming out of this. I don't see the families that we serve wanting to put their kids through online education. I think we might move the direction you're talking about, Jeremy, over time, but I think we got a chance to shape that process before it all is lost.
I heard the graduate dean today actually say she wishes that we were mandated to teach one online class. Just saying, that every faculty should teach one online class. I think she meant per year.
Huh.
But I mean, I was kind of like, and this was an online directors meeting that I go to. So it was before Faculty Senate, but then at Faculty Senate, there was a lot of discussion about this kind of thing too. And so I do wonder about where we're headed, like what kind of precedents get set that then, and I found that ironic. I don't know how many of you were on I've told Justin this before, we're on, and I know he was on the chancellor and provost's thing where there was like 900 of us on, faculty and staff,
do
and
it.
they couldn't figure out the microphone, you know, and the camera. And it was like, you just ask all faculty to go online, and you guys can't figure out how to run a Zoom meeting. And granted, a big Zoom meeting, but I mean, it was just like, it was kind of ironic to me that here we have this, you know, you're asking us to do this, and yet you don't. So I take your point to heart, Michael, the need to kind of get people trained and being able to do it is a huge cost that I think it's a blind spot for a lot of the administrators. They see the dollar signs of it's cheaper to run an online program, right? You can put butts in seats and get tuition dollars, right? And so, you know, there's a kind of math to it that completely from an administrative perspective makes sense, but from a pedagogical perspective, I don't think makes sense.
Yeah, when I was at Texas A&M, I taught a class online there every summer, and they got $750 per student in that class extra than what they got for face-to-face classes. So there was a big incentive for the department to teach online classes. But I have endless amounts of criticisms of online education. But one of them is much of what is good in the world doesn't happen online. Right. Getting food to people who need it doesn't happen online. Fighting oppression doesn't really happen online. People need to be, versed in the ability to engage with people in real time and real space, because that's what they're going to go out and do. I mean, if they're going to be in IT or stuck in a lab as engineers or scientists, all right, maybe. But those people that are in the humanities and the social sciences and are going to be immersed in their communities and working to help people's lives, you just don't put them through an online education and then say, all right, you're ready, go help those people, right? Right. You actually have to have visceral experience. And that 4 years is often very hard for undergraduates who are not open to that. So they need to learn through that 4 years to make them even ready. Like they might be shitty at engaging with people for the course of that 4 years, but at least they had that 4 years of practice before they get to their entry-level career position where they're like, okay, at least I'm a little bit comfortable hearing different opinions and interacting with different people and understanding how theory and practice relate. Because if we push that all online, I'm very skeptical about that producing an improvements and progress in society, which we're already having trouble with already, if you hadn't noticed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key to it, is figuring out how to articulate to people what it is we so value about face-to-face education and face-to-face kinds of communication. I think one of the interesting things to think about is how you build trust with people in an online setting, because if you're going to have difficult conversations that ask people to kind of push their paradigms and their thinking, you're going to have to build that trust with them. And that's it's been my experience that a lot of that happens kind of non-verbally in a classroom setting. So
I'll drink to that.
Totally. I was thinking, like, one of the things that I feel like my students lost, and I actually told them this, and I don't know if it was a mistake to tell them this or not, but in this community and communication class that I teach, inevitably it happens somewhere between the 2/3 and 3/4 mark of the semester. They have this moment where it's like they all become this community themselves. And that happens in a lot of different classes, but it feels different in this community and communication class because it's actually the thing that we're studying. And then all of a sudden they have this aha moment where they're like, oh, we're this community. And it's like, they were right there. Like they were so close. It usually happens after they give 2 speeches in the class. And it usually happens right after they give their first speech and they give each other some peer feedback. And it's this first opportunity where they like help each other grow and learn from each other. And we didn't get to that point. Like we had 1 day of speeches left when the semester got moved online. And so we didn't get to have that moment where last semester I had one of my students jump up out of his speech and give this whole illustration about how he thought everybody engaged with each other. And everybody had this moment where like, you're absolutely right. And it was this huge moment when everybody came together. And it's like this amazingly thrilling moment that happens that can't get recreated online. And that's one of the things I'm sad that my students missed out on this.
And Marianne, didn't you have last semester a student pass away, and then like that bonding over that student?
That was fall of 2018. And that we had one of the students in my class, Cam. He was, you may have all heard this, it was toward the end of that fall semester in 2018. I think it was 2018. Yeah. And he was in a car accident over, I think it was like right behind the Sonic, just off campus. And he was the passenger in a car, and the kid who was the driver ran from the scene. And it was like he was there on Monday, and then Wednesday he was not. And it was just like devastating for the class. But at the same time, like there was this, like it brought them all together in this really interesting way and we had these conversations that they probably this was the first time that a lot of them were dealing with death. And, I don't think we could have ever recreated any of that sort of community support network online.
Wouldn't even know.
I think a lot of community support can happen online, but some of the stuff that we all went through together in that class, like it was very different.
Well, online is a resource, and it's a supportive resource, but it's not a surrogate for like the real thing, right? So like all these people that we can't interact with now in our work and our social life, like what we're seeing right now is going online for education, right? And how much people are starved for actual visceral engagement with one another, right? The further this goes on, the harder it's going to be to reintegrate and to be able to re-socialize, because we're, as Jen points out, we're already dealing with these distrust issues that are going to be amplified by the situation where, because of the ambiguity, we don't know how to interact with people or like, is it okay to go to a restaurant now? Is it okay to go to a concert now? This is just like a living lab of putting people online and like, spreading people apart. And I don't know, I just hope that isn't taken for granted by the people that continue to see higher education as a profitable, efficiency, centered outlet for, cultivating the next wave of cattle.
Yeah.
Well, it's that business centered model, where you're you said efficiency, right? And so trust is important, but when people are pushing for that efficiency, I had this conversation with a colleague of mine the other day about group work in classes, and she was teaching a class at Rutgers that was in person and then moved online. And she works on social change and trying to figure out how to organize and do community organizing around social change. And she's like, the creativity of a group, it's always difficult, even in the classroom, to get students to work together and collaborate and get creativity. But then once she moved it online, she was just kind of saying, she was calling me, asking me like, what ideas do you have? Because I am like stuck trying to get more than one or two people in a group of like 5 to take initiative to work together. And what, and like using like Google Docs and other online tools to get them to collaborate. But then she found that like, and I was like, yeah, no, I have this issue too, that it's like that individual, and maybe it's the online environment, that individualism, we're literally in a box right now, right? and you get kind of caught in this like, okay, so she would like break them into breakout rooms and then say, and then she would go in and listen in, and they would just spend the first 5 minutes of like, say 20 or 30 minutes of time to work in your group, just saying, okay, so you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, and you're going to do this. Okay, let's go. Break. And they would all go and like create, add to this Google document, but it was all like individualized, not integrated in any way. There's no collaboration. And so how do you teach that collaboration? And it has to do with trust, but it has to do with creativity as well, that I think it's not impossible. I don't want to say it's impossible to do online, but it's harder. It's just more difficult. It's hard to do in person, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting is, like, even thinking about the food networks and things of that nature, is it's the relationships we built before all this happened that are starting to pay benefits, because, you know, you couldn't find the people after the crisis happened and connect them to the resources. Like, those networks had to already be built for that work to happen. And yeah, it's a real challenge to figure out how to build those networks with less face-to-face contact.
I absolutely agree, because I think that we had done so much in food, like you said beforehand, to build, like, I've been so amazed by it. Like, it's super dense and everybody knows each other, and like everybody's working so well together right now. Like, it's very reassuring on multiple levels. At the same time, I think though that there came a point when we had to really scale back the face-to-face interactions. And I think about this because I'm doing a lot of work with the corner farmers market right now, and they are really the only neighborhood market that's still able to be open. The People's Market in Glenwood was not able to open, and the Farmers Curb Market, because it's in a city facility and the city closed down all of their facilities, and they're not able to operate right now. So right now the corner farmers market's kind of it. There's the big state farmers market that's out off 40, but I'm not counting that one because technically it's not in Greensboro proper. So corner market's the only one that's operating there. And we did some stuff right away. Like on March 14th, we did kind of like this listening session to find out, like, what do people want to do? And really, like, the thing that people have wanted to do most was do advanced ordering and then do a pickup, like do a drive-through pickup, so that they could cut down on their interactions with people. So we had to figure out an online solution to ultimately what had been a face-to-face system before then. And so we had to figure out how to transfer that, not just for the benefit of the vendors, but also, like, the very first weekend after a lot of the social distancing started in, corner market saw their Snap EBT business double, because they also double Snap. So if you walk in with $10 on your Snap card, they'll give you 10 more at the corner market, and so you can spend $20 there. And so they're one of the few groups that can do that. And so, you know, we had to start thinking online. There came a point when we couldn't do face-to-face meetings anymore. And so we had to go online. And I do think that the strength of the networks that we had before made that happen much more easily. But I think, you know, to speak to your point, Jeremy, it's almost like we've got to treat it like it's any other training ground. Like, they're not going to be perfect doing online collaboration in the beginning, and we can't expect them to. And we've got to give them the space to mess it up and to make mistakes and to try to learn from that, so that when they actually get in a scenario where, oh, you've got to bring 15 different institutions together to try to launch a K through 12 meal network and make sure the food pantries are okay, and make sure the farmers markets can still operate, and like moving all of these pieces all at once. And we had to do all of it online. Like, they had one face-to-face meeting before social distancing rules really started to go into play. And then after that, we've done almost everything else online in terms of the organizing piece of it. The delivery still has to be face-to-face in terms of pickup for food and stuff like that. Because, like, to Justin's point, yes, you cannot. 3D printing has gotten a lot better, and there are 3D food printers out there, but, you know, that's not going to save us right now. So well, yeah, right, we're not going to be able to get people online yet.
The actual corner market still has to be in person, though. Like, you can't separate all those entities, all those craftspeople and bakers and, you know, butchers and growers of produce. You separate them, and then you don't have the farmers market anymore.
No, you don't have a farmers market anymore. You have something different. You have an online advanced ordering and pickup network. And I think that's, you know, that's the social element to it is really important too. And the social element is really important to college. Like, yeah. I was walking the dog with my friend Erica Boyson, who's a flute professor at UNCG, with her dog yesterday on campus. And
I miss walking on campus. Like, you feel alive when you're on campus. Like, there's a sense of identity when you're on campus. Like, if students that go to, what's an online college? What's the one that Purdue just bought?
University of Phoenix.
Kaplan. Yeah, Phoenix. Purdue just bought Kaplan, right? So like, how do you have a sense of identity related to your university if you don't ever set foot on a university campus? People don't come back for homecoming for an online education. People don't give money, I would assume, to universities that they got a degree online, because why would you? There's no
I gotta think of it, like my sister works for University of Phoenix. We both have our undergrads from Bradley. I have my two, my master's and my PhD from Arizona State, and she's got 2 masters from University of Phoenix. And I identify as a Sun Devil just as much as I do as a Brave. But my she's a Bradley girl, and she's not a University of Phoenix girl. Like, so I totally see that point.
Are the University of Phoenix the Phoenixes? What is their mascot?
Yeah.
The Phoeni? I don't know what that is plural.
The squirrel beards, that's what they are.
The squirrel beards.
So we are 75 minutes into this.
75 minutes in. Okay, I have one more bold statement I want to make, and it kind of goes back to something that Michael said at the very beginning, and then we can start to wrap things up, because I'd also like to hear what you all have to say about this. So it was your comment, Michael, about donating money, and feeling like that's not enough, that you should be doing more. No, donate money. Like, I was thinking about this because there are a lot of groups right now who are in need of financial resources to be able to continue to do the things that they need to do. And right now they can't take on volunteer labor because they don't know what to do with people. Or, they know how best to serve the groups that they are working with. And so I'm not suggesting that you were going to start something new, but a lot of people are like, oh, we need to start something new. It's like, no, figure out the things that are already out there. And if there's something that aligns with your ideals, then try to support them in the ways that they have asked for support. And a lot of groups right now are asking for financial support, and they feel awkward about it because they feel like they're being crass. Like they are trying to take advantage of a really difficult situation. But in the grand scheme of things, they are best positioned to be able to help some of the groups who need the most help. And I think about—
Why don't you share that information with, like, that we can share, like, seriously, through an online listserv, because through the university, because I think a lot of people would like to do that.
Like to donate. And I think that's probably one thing. Like, we've already got this for the food stuff. It's already on that food document that we created. And I think there are going to be some other institutions out there that are going to be in similar situations. And I know right now, there's a Greensboro mutual aid group that is organizing, and it's for a lot of folks who have lost their jobs. It started off with restaurant industry folks who lost their jobs, but it has expanded into several people who have been furloughed or laid off or have lost jobs as a result of COVID-19 and coronavirus. Mm-hmm. And one of the calls that came out from this group was to pledge or donate part of your stimulus check to these mutual aid groups, or to things like the Corner Farmers Market, the Farmers Curb Market, those groups that are trying to keep going in certain ways. I know the IRC has just launched a fundraising campaign in conjunction with several of the restaurants in Greensboro, where you can pay $25 and then you get a t-shirt. It's one of the Greensboro Strong and Greensboro Local t-shirts that they started up when we had the tornado back in, was it 2008? Spring of 2008-ish?
There was one,
or
the one
2018-ish, sorry, 2008. 2018, it's 10 years later, yeah. At any rate, so I guess there's a call. I guess I'm gonna, I feel very fortunate in that my income isn't getting interrupted, knock on wood, as long as the state legislature keeps it together. My income is not getting interrupted. And so, like, I'm planning on donating at least half of my stimulus check to
Jeremy and I had this conversation. I don't need it.
Much of it, but I'm planning on donating at least half of it. And so if, I guess, my call out to faculty and to people who are in positions where they could potentially donate or pledge part of their stimulus check, I think that's something that we can do. And I think it should make you feel like you are doing enough, because that is a piece that people need right now.
Is this like the ice bucket challenge? Make it rain, make it rain.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said. Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know what everybody thinks about that, but that's my little personal plea at the end of.
Right.
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it too. I mean, I'd like to hear what Michael has to say because he's been donating to community and schools. But I was just thinking as you were talking, the comment about the organization feeling like it's crass or something to add, that comment struck me because I used to work in international development and I worked during the tsunami that happened and actually went over to Sri Lanka after the tsunami that hit, and I worked for a very small Christian aid organization, and they were literally they were in Andes, New York, a very small town in upstate New York, but they were literally, and I was like, what are you guys doing up there? They were literally putting jars out in like businesses, tsunami aid, and like collecting coins and stuff. And I was like, I felt like that. I felt like, are you really doing that? Like, I don't feel comfortable with that. I'm working for this organization, like, and I didn't feel comfortable with it. And part of it was to like pay. I mean, some of that money went to pay me to fly over to Sri Lanka.
Right.
And I was like, it was one of the reasons I thought afterwards, like, yeah, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Like, I felt it was, I don't know. I just felt it was strange. Crass might be the word, or I don't know if crass is the right word. It just felt.
They just feel awkward. Like, I think there are some groups that just feel awkward because they're like, now maybe isn't the time we should be asking for money. And I was like, or maybe now is exactly the time you should be asking for money. Because it's when people start to realize how much need there is. And I mean, like, one of the groups I'm working with, like I said, is the corner market. And part of the circumstances that led to my working with them is our communication studies department at UNCG. We are the National Communication Association's first Center for Collaboration and Community Engagement. I'm totally going to get that wrong. There's 4 C's in it somewhere. But it's a
sounds like my
center.
report cards in college.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like a traveling center for community engagement and collaboration. And I ended up working with the corner market because they wanted to launch their Green for Greens campaign, which is basically to raise the money so they can do the SNAP doubling. And so it'll help keep them sustainable and keep that program sustainable, hopefully for a couple of years, assuming that we do a good job with all of the fundraising piece of it. And my thoughts are right now, like, this is a time when SNAP EBT folks are some of our most vulnerable populations. And many folks are not in a position where they can go out and look for a new job because we don't know where the jobs are right now. And so, now is exactly the time when we need to get folks to think about, hey, there are people out there who are struggling to eat right now. I would not say that we are experiencing hunger on the same level as other nations in this world, but there are people who are struggling to figure out where to find food. And if there are things that we can do to make that process more manageable, I think that we should do that.
Yeah, the thing I miss most
give to the
these
corner
days,
market, I guess, is one thing I'm saying. We'll double SNAP EBT.
the thing I miss most these days is going to concerts. I see at least one concert a week, right? So I've been actually donating money to like venues or like small artists, who do like a live stream on Facebook or whatever, and tip them in their Venmo jar or whatever. Because I'm worried about all these really tiny venues that aren't going to be there that I'm used to going to, like Cat's Cradle or even, Ramcat or Blind Tiger. Like, you take that stuff out of my life and my life is not as happy as it once was. So
those are things that keep some of us in Greensboro.
Exactly.
Did you want to chime in, Michael, or yeah?
I mean, I'll just add, I think I appreciate the comments, and we need to have some short and long-term thinking too. And I think as we come out of this, UNC Greensboro, we just got to think about how do we support our community as an engaged institution, because there's going to be some major needs. There's a lot of harm caused here that we haven't even begun to grapple with to communities. And I mean, we've worn that community engagement hat well since I've been here. And I think we'll continue to, but I mean, now's the time when it's tough, right? Because we're gonna have legitimate concerns about our budget, our enrollment declining, all that's gonna distract us from thinking about what are our obligations to the community we live in? And I think it's going to take faculty like ourselves holding us accountable to that, to address some of these needs that we're positioned to deal with. I think Marianne identified several ways we do that during the crisis, but we got to step it up after things go back to some kind of normal.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that Justin was saying that we have this tendency to like be very individualistic, and I definitely have those moments when I'm like, okay, you know, I've got to get my rice and beans to have in my house because I've got to feed myself. But I think we can also take it in the other direction and realize just how interdependent we are globally. And then that means that we do have a shared fate, right? And that it is about making that system work for everyone as opposed to, you know, that ultimately it doesn't work if it's just all about me making sure that I have my immediate needs met.
Consumption. It's I didn't say neoliberalism. It's consumption.
Hey, you're gonna bring it back there. All right, y'all. I think we're at last call. Like, all right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, I would like to, you know, what was a in the Lost episode, which is eternally lost.
I don't even remember half the stuff we said.
Me singing a couple of songs. One which I think is very appropriate. So I'd like to sing it on our way out, if that's possible. If you all give me the time to do so. It's a quick one. And I didn't write these lyrics, but back in my hometown of Urbana, Illinois, in the county of Champaign, every year at around graduation time, high school graduation, they would have the valedictorians and salutatorians. Is it salutatorians? Is that salutatorians? I was neither of those. They have all those people wear their caps and gowns and come on this commercial, and they sing this really beautiful song that I love so much. And so I'd like to sing it because we're not going to have commencement this year. So this goes out to all of our graduating seniors that won't watch this, hopefully. So bear with me, all right? A yearbook full of memories, a time to share with friends, a hug that says we'll keep in touch because friendship never ends. The autographs, the cap and gowns, the honors that you've earned, a future that looks bright because of everything you've learned, a smile that says you've made it all the way, and graduation day is here. You're the best of the class this year. Thank you. To all the graduating seniors.
Cheers. Yes.
Well done.
All right. Well, thank you, Jen and Michael.
Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, guys. It was great to talk to you.
And I don't know if we're going to do another one.
Hopefully it was stimulating in more ways than one.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about, you know, we're pretty sure we're going to reboot this thing again. So hopefully there will be a season 3, episode 2. Who are we? We're trying to get Michael Frierson and Ann Wallace for the next one. So hopefully. Here's your invitation if you didn't know that yet.
Yeah, so that's the lead into that is so they're both AAUP people, and AAUP on April 14th the national organization is actually having an hour-long talk. Jeremy, I don't know if you got this, about the future of intellectual property, because everything you post online for online classes is also co-owned by the university.
I didn't see that, but I'm glad.
April 14th at 4 o'clock.
Can you shoot me that email? Because I think I missed it.
Yeah, I'll send it to all y'all. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, in the meantime,
peace.
Enjoy online.
Take care.
Bye.
Adios.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for Liquid Philosophy. We hope you've enjoyed your time thinking and drinking with some local college professors about what we do and why it's important. We do take the topic of drinking very seriously, and we want to make sure that no one is out there drinking and driving. Stay safe, y'all. And if you feel like you're having a problem with alcohol or other drugs, please contact your campus health department or talk to your doctor. I should probably also mention that the views of Liquid Philosophy hosts and our guests do not necessarily reflect the views of the University of North Carolina at Greensboro or the UNC system. That should do it for the disclaimers. Until next time.